Hello, everybody. How are we all doing? Good? Well, great. Okay, it looks like we have admitted the waiting room. Hello, welcome to the third ABLE Learning session hosted in partnership with Colorado Post and the ABLE Colorado team. We are so happy to have all of you here, and we're so grateful for all of the hardworking members of the Colorado team for helping us put together this event. My name is Lindy Hoffman, and I'm a project coordinator with the ABLE National Team at the Georgetown University Law Center. In my role, I support various statewide initiatives, and I have the pleasure of working with ABLE agencies on the West Coast and Midwest on their implementation of the program. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our two panelists today. So first, Scott Huntsberry is a retired FBI supervisory special agent and currently works as an investigation specialist with Shepard Mullins Government Contracts Practice Group in the firm's Washington, D.C. office. During his 20-year tenure with the FBI, Scott served in the Charlotte, Jacksonville, and Jackson field offices, as well as FBI headquarters in the cyber, inspection, and training divisions. In the field, he supervised both cybercrime and violent crime task forces. He has significant investigative experience in the areas of digital forensics, violent gangs and narcotics, civil rights, and public corruption. Scott's specialty assignments included FBI Evidence Response Team Member, Crisis Management Coordinator, and Certified Digital Forensics Examiner. In addition to his investigative activities with Shepard Mullin, Scott supports the firm's commitment to its partnership with ABLE and serves as an ABLE National Instructor. Captain Gregory Hanna Jr. retired in 2020 from the Metro Transit Police Department in Washington, D.C. after 27 years of service. During his tenure with the department, he served in numerous leadership and command roles, which included leading the Honor Guard Unit, commander of the Special Weapons and Tactics SWAT team, section commander of the K-9 Unit, precinct commander, commander of the Criminal Investigations Division, watch commander, and commander of Internal Affairs. He was instrumental in the design and implementation of the agency's Internal Investigation Tracking and Accountability System, IA Pro and Blue Team. His strategies led to a comprehensive department-wide early warning system to proactively identify emerging issues for early intervention. In 2016, he was instrumental in the development and implementation of the department's first summer crime initiative. The introduction of this program integrated weekly CompStat crime strategies and the use of GIS technology to identify emerging crime patterns, crime hotspot mapping, resource allocation for crime reduction, and opportunities for community outreach events. Most notably, he is the security strategist and author of several major special event security deployment plans for his agency in Washington, D.C. The events included regional large-scale events and several national special security events, such as the Nuclear Security Summit, State of the Union, and presidential inaugurations. He is a graduate from the FBI National Academy Session 261 in Quantico, Virginia, as well as Leadership in Police Organizations, LPO. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice with a minor in Homeland Security from the University of Maryland University College. He has received multiple distinctions, which includes medals for meritorious and distinguished service. He possesses over 25 years of instructor experience administering national curriculums focused on bias-based profiling, implicit bias, ethical standards, officer-involved shootings, Blue Courage, and numerous academy-based law enforcement curricula. He is also a certified national trainer and leadership team member for the ABLE project. We are very lucky to have both of you joining us today, so thank you so much for your time. But before we dive into the substance of the panel, I'd love to turn it over to Elisa DiTrolio, who is the team lead for our ABLE Colorado project, to share a little bit about what ABLE Colorado is hoping to accomplish and how any interested officers or agencies can get involved.
Thanks so much, Lindy. I won't take up too much of your time because I want to maximize the time with two of possibly the best instructors that we have who are going to impart their wisdom and skill set for being successful in implementing the ABLE program. But just wanted to give a quick note that for those of you that are not aware, Denver Police Department, which is my home agency, and Colorado Post with the AG's office, partnered about a year and a half ago to really bring this wonderful job-saving, life-saving, wellness-promoting program to every agency in the state of Colorado. No matter how many staff you have, no matter what your resources look like, we have banded together several agencies strong now to provide assistance with your application, with giving you some more information about the training, any implementation support as you move forward through the program, and probably most importantly, training support, whether it's trainers like Scott or Greg on the national level or your fellow agencies. And we definitely welcome you to reach out to myself, to Able, Georgetown, with any questions or how to become a part of this. We would love to have you become part of our network and absolutely help with this training initiative. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lindy and Scott and Greg. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Elisa. Really appreciate it. And if anybody would like any more information, you can email the initiative at the email address that I just dropped into the chat. And you can also find more information about it on our website under agencies and initiatives. So I'm going to go ahead and get started asking our two wonderful panelists a few questions about how to ensure that you are set up for success implementing ABLE at your agency. But if anybody has any questions along the way, I want to invite anybody in our audience to please feel free to put your questions in the chat, or you can feel free to message me directly. We'll also reserve a few minutes at the end for questions as well. So I'm going to address this first question to Scott. So when an agency is accepted into ABLE, there's often a waiting period of a month or more while instructors get signed up for a train the trainer before the training will be rolled out to agency personnel. This also provides an incredible opportunity for agencies to lay the groundwork for ABLE training and communicate effectively about the program. So how would you recommend that agency instructors and program coordinators promote the training before the program and also during those first critical months of implementation?
That's a good question. Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about it. I would say it's interesting as I was thinking about this answer. The answer I would have given to this question about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, it's very different, or at least it has some differences from the one I'm going to give you today. And the reason for that is I think a lot of police officers are aware of what ABLE is. Or there's an increasing understanding and awareness of the ABLE project. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. I think we've touched almost 1/3 of the police departments, organizations. So the ABLE brand is out there. But that doesn't mean that there's not already some misperception. So the reason I'm sort of prefacing this is to say that I think one of the most important things that an agency can do in that gap between the application, the acceptance, and however they're going to go about getting their train the trainer facilitated is that dead space. And police officers, sheriff's deputies, like no different than any other organization. In the absence of actual truthful information, we're going to make up whatever in the hell we come up with. The rumor or the misperceptions about a program, they're going to be all over the place. And so I think the most important thing right out of the gate, is to have a clear communications plan of how are you going to message this program to the troops, right? Because it like you said, it could be a month, it could be a couple of months before the actual training begins. So with that in mind, again, you want to think about who are you messaging? You're messaging the folks within the organization. And that being said, it's very specific culture. So it's going to be specific to your own agency's culture in terms of what other training might have preceded ABLE. Like, have you had de-escalation training? Have you had CIT? Are there other types of trainings that you can say, you can compare and contrast and see how they complement and they fit into an existing game plan. So, you want to make sure that the messaging, you find the alignment that ABLE is not some standalone. It fits into something that we're already doing. It enhances these other things, and this is how it's going to work. You might want to message the fact that this is going to enhance and promote safety and wellness and well-being, not only within the ranks of the agency, but for the community as well. So it's a program design, and again, we say this throughout our training on a regular basis. It's about preventing, stopping harm. So selling it for what it is, that It's about wellness for the officers and wellness and health and safety of the communities that we serve. And that ultimately ABLE is going to contribute to your own, not only your own professional development as a police officer or sheriff's deputy, but your own personal development. You know, as an aside, I can't tell you the number of folks that have come up to me after training and said, you know, I thought I was coming to police training, but really this is human one-on-one kind of training. Like these are skills that make you a better wife, a better husband, a mother, father, sister, brother, fill in the blank. So kind of tapping into that idea that there's more of a holistic, approach here to the person. And of course, it's tailored to a law enforcement environment, but the idea of peer intervention, active bystandership is something we don't get a lot of training, and it can benefit us throughout different areas of our life. I guess a couple of the notes I thought I might want to touch on in terms of preparation during that pause. In addition to having that communication plan, executing that communication plan is also important. So once you've got your message and you've got a great message, how are you going to get it out to folks, right? So think about creating, there's some very obvious things that come right to mind. Like you may have a newsletter, right? You may have a bulletin board. You may have roll call types of opportunities to talk a little bit and whet the appetite of the folks. But there are other creative ways that you could potentially message and let folks know that ABLE is coming. It could be a video recorded message from your sheriff or your chief that's basically giving his or her endorsement of why they feel passionately or strongly that ABLE is something that's going to benefit their agency. So when they see the buy-in and support from the top, it's a lot easier to get on board. And you message that throughout a command staff as well, so that you want to make sure that the message that the command staff is providing is unified. Now I realize that may be beyond the scope of an instructor or a coordinator to make those sort of things happen, but there's certainly things you want to communicate up the chain of command, because I think I've heard different, statements about ABLE implementation, but I've heard one phrase that kind of sticks with me, and it's, a chief can't make, or a chief can really make, or a sheriff, your chief executive, they can't make it happen, but they can sure keep it from happening, right? So the messaging that happens from the top down is going to be significant in whether or not you're going to have success. Another thing you think about would be identifying leaders within your organization. And I was very careful to say leaders, because I know there are formal leaders that have the rank on their shoulder, but there's also informal leaders. And consider developing a cadre of sometimes we call them ambassadors, but folks that are out there talking about ABLE in a positive way. Those informal leaders, they're leaders because of their credibility. And when they speak to a program, when they feel like it's something worthwhile, and others listen and what they have to say, it puts ABLE just one step ahead, right? Because you don't have to necessarily convince people there's some value here. When they realize that folks that they respect and work with already see that there's value in something like this, they're, at the very least, they're curious and they're engaged, and they're going to be kind of coming with an open mind about what ABLE is and what it has to offer. You might consider having some question and answer sessions, right? So you might schedule some opportunities for folks, just like we're doing here today, to come into the agency and ask questions, whether it's your training staff, whether it's your leadership staff, so they can have the opportunity to ask questions that they don't know where else to go to get those answers. So question and answer type scenarios. As you slowly begin to roll ABLE out in the agency, look for and capture success stories, because nothing really says, hey, there's value in this program, like people who have success stories to tell of harm that's been prevented, mistakes that were prevented, wellness that was preserved, right? And you can anonymize them. You don't necessarily have to, call people out or make people feel embarrassed, but you can find ways to sanitize stories and still get the message across that good things are happening because we're doing this. And let's continue to provide that momentum and support for this program. And I guess the last thing one last thing I'll touch on is, don't let there be like an information back. Like, keep people informed, right? If you said we've got this thing coming and we're rolling it out, well, then follow it up. And whatever those channels you're using, whether it's emails or bulletin boards or roll calls and things like that, let them know, like, hey, we've trained this many people. We've got these many instructors. We've got this many sessions coming up. We're scheduled to be completely done with our ABLE training by September. We're 2/3 of the way there. Like, let people know that this is not something that's just sort of happening in the background, but there are a lot of people that are committed to making this take place and then successfully. So, I mean, again, there's probably other things that an agency can do in that gap, but the one thing you don't want to do is just ignore it, right? In the absence of getting the information communicated, you're going to have to deal with the misinformation. So that would be, I hope that's kind of that was the area that you were trying to focus on, Lindy, with your question. But those are my thoughts in terms of what to do before you actually start training and during those early days of training.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Scott. I think that was really helpful. I would love to provide the opportunity for Greg if you have anything to add. Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, no, I think Scott covered that beautifully. I mean, that was well said and well put. So kudos to you, Scott.
I couldn't agree more.
It's not nearly as good as your bio, man, but I'm going to go. I got to beef up my bio for sure.
Yeah. Listen, I don't know who that guy is, but I just want to know.
You got to meet this.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Hey, you got to get used to it. This is how Scott and I operate the classroom. So we have a great time, as you can probably imagine.
We would never guess we're brothers, would they?
Oh my gosh, you two crack me up. Well, okay, so now that we've covered setting up for success in terms of, rolling out the program, I would love to cover setting up for success within the training itself. So this next question is for both of you. I have seen both of you as instructors for in-person training sessions, and you both truly have a gift for getting people engaged right off the bat. So, I mean, given you both clearly have effective approaches to kicking off the training, what are your tips for kicking off the class? And can you give an example of a great opening?
You want me to start off, Scott, or you want to start off? Or
yeah, why don't you start it off there? And
okay.
I'll pick up the scraps.
Gotcha. Well, I would say it's going to be important, number one, to grab everyone's attention. And it doesn't have to be something that is just over the top to get their attention, right? In a law enforcement environment, whether you're sworn or whether you're civilian, they're already doing an assessment of you as soon as you step into the classroom, right? So that assessment is already happening from the time you come in. And so I especially when this is in person, and I do this online as well. Scott and I will often do this, especially when we're in person, as we're already set up when folks come to the classroom. So the first thing I would say is a part of that success is being ready to go as soon as the first student walks into that classroom. And so an instructor has to anticipate that a student is going to come early, right? So if you're going to be starting at 8 a.m., you want to be prepared, ready to go. You slide back up, everything is in order by 7:30, and you know that everything is running. And use that 30 minutes as just kind of spare time for any technicalities that come up. So I would say that's probably the first thing, because as soon as the first student walks through the door, you want to be able to show that you are ready to go, and that matters to students. If there's this organization, it's going to be a long 8-hour day for them, and it doesn't take long for third rail to get around that classroom. And when I say third rail, I'm talking about electricity and that conversation to get around that this is going to be a long session, and the students are not organized. The second thing is I would say the greeting. To me, I like to greet folks. And so I will often go around the classroom and I'll shake hands. Of course, in COVID, we had to do fist pumps and elbows, right? But I still go around and I greet every single person. I introduce myself to them and I get to know who they are. It kind of does two things. Number one, it kind of gives that soft touch and put them in a comfortable space very early on. So it starts that process of buy-in as we're going to be working through the 8-hour block of curriculum. But also it helps me as an instructor to know their name, because when we're calling on them and when I'm engaging with them, I want to know who they are. I want to call them by their name. I want to call them by the thing that is most comfortable to them. And I think that kind of settles the class down into a space where they feel like it's safe. And so my buy-in is a little bit easier in the process, as I start to lay out the framework of ABLE. From a successful standpoint, I talk about something creative that I do oftentimes. And so far, no one has beat me on this, but they've come in very, very close. And Scott's smiling because you know what I'm getting ready to say. So usually in that space where no one's in a classroom. Well, first off, let me just start off with police culture for a second, because in classrooms and lectures, things like that, law enforcement professionals do not like sitting in the front of a classroom. I don't know what it is. If they have a choice of seats they're going to take either the middle seats or the back seats at the back of the classroom, right? I mean, it's without fail, you just sit there and watch the experiment happen live. And so oftentimes what I'll do is I'll take a $50 gift card, and it is a real $50 gift card. It is $50 on it. I received it as a gift. I don't know if it was birthday or Father's Day, but it is a real gift card. And I will tape it under either a chair or a desk in the front row. And I pick it at random. And then Scott and I, or whoever we're working with, will sit there and watch folks come in the classroom. Everything looks normal, and we'll see who's going to sit there. And whoever sits there will get that $50 gift card. Like I said, I still have the gift card, so no one has actually sat there. So the experiment is kind of proving that they don't like sitting in that front row. But then kind of to reveal before we even introduce ourselves and say who we are, who I am, I'll go and maybe come up with a punchline and say, hey, look, you know, agency such and such, I really appreciate you all having us here. And we appreciate the dinner that you are providing for us this evening to the instructional staff, because had someone sat in this seat, and I'll point to the seat and then I'll pull out the gift card and show them that it is a real gift card. And I'll even let them verify it if they want to online, to let them know that, hey, it is a real gift card. And usually we'll get smiles, we'll get laughs, we'll get some "oh shucks," things of that nature. And we do have some folks that have sat literally right next to it. But that is really a real creative and kind of comedic way to get things started. And it's a really good icebreaker, I think. And usually by then, as we start to introduce ourselves and work into the buy-in phase, everything is a lot easier because they feel a lot more comfortable, because they know that we're real people and we're not there to tell them that they're bad. So that's kind of my take. I'll turn over to Scott for anything he might have.
Just be advised, we're talking to folks that are going to train multiple times at their agency. This trick works one time and one time only.
One time only.
The word will get out, and it's a free outback if you sit in the front and then go out and fight each other for that first seat. Anyway, no, it's a little, it's things just like Greg mentions, right? That it's little icebreakers. It's just humanizing. And for Greg and I, when we come into an agency and we don't know a single soul, maybe we know one or two we've talked to on Zoom or on phone, it's a little bit more difficult. I think some of the challenges that y'all will face is because you are known entities, right? So I would say my encouragement to you would be authentic, be yourself. Don't try to be something that you're not, because everybody knows your mistakes and everybody knows, who you really are. And that's a good thing, because you can leverage that. You can leverage that credibility and transparency of who you are to create authenticity. Because if people think you're really authentic about your delivery, and that kind of couples with a positive attitude, if they think you're real and they genuinely believe that you believe in this program or are excited about it, look, it may not take you for 8 hours, but it's going to give you the first 30 minutes or so. All right. And now the job is up to you. Can you keep up? Right. You've opened the door with that authenticity. They see that you're positive. They see that you believe there's something there. They're going to give you that opportunity, but you got to keep it going, right? So once you get that door open, you got to walk through it and keep them throughout the day. That's a lot of things that Greg has mentioned, like using people's names. Like people want to, engage people, shake their hand, greet them, be positive. Another way that you can do it, not you specifically, but as an agency, is it's pretty powerful when your chief or your sheriff is sitting there in the room when everybody walks in, and he or she, everybody knows how busy they are, but guess what? They're sitting there welcoming everybody. They took that time out. So if you can find either those formal, informal leaders to sort of be there to help kick it off and create this atmosphere of like, hey, this is important. This matters. We really believe that this is something that's worth the time. And I'm showing you that because I'm here. I will not name an agency by name, but Greg and I recently had the chance to teach at a really large police department. And on the very first day, for the full 8 hours, the chief of this incredible, you all know it's an incredibly large department, spent his 8 hours in the front row answering every question. Now, that's an incredibly powerful message to command staff around him like, whoa, the chief must really believe in this. Maybe we should give it a look as well, right? So yeah, it's being authentic, it's being approachable, it's being who you are, and maybe picking up little tricks along the way. You know, you don't necessarily have to do the icebreaker and trust falls, but just, you know, break that little bit of tension that might be there in the morning, and then you got to keep them for the next 7.5 hours, and that's going to come down to your knowing the material, being authoritative about the material, and practicing so they see that you've really taken your time to present well. Those are my thoughts.
I loved that response from both of you. That was really great. And I think one thing that came up for me while you were talking is just, you know, the energy between the two of you, especially when the two of you are teaching together, you can just tell that you know each other and you know each other's personalities and you're joking around with each other. And that's another tip that I would give for folks, especially at larger agencies where you might not know the other instructor that you're going into the training with. It is a long day. It's 8 hours. Hopefully you get a chance to meet with that person beforehand and at least just get to know each other's personalities a little bit so that you can play off of each other and really just create that energy together. Because if you go in and you're complete strangers to one another, folks can tell, and that can create some unnecessary awkwardness as you get the training kicked off. So
Lindy, let me say on top of what you said, if you're meeting your co-instructor 10 minutes before you teach together, you're going to have a bad day. All right. So you've already set yourself up for problems. So, and I imagine that everybody on the call understands that, right? But just to, you know, maybe to state the obvious, you really should be meeting ahead of time to table talk, walk through, make sure you understand each other's transitions, develop ground rules. Like Greg and I will, you know, we've had the same conversation, even though we've taught together a zillion times. Like, you know, almost sort of sounds like the invitation for intervention. Like, hey, Greg, if I forget something, remember, you ain't hurting my feelings if you step in and say, hey, that's really good, Scott, but also just remember this. And we both know that each other are not going to be upset because we've had that conversation. But those are conversations you got to have before you show up for training, or else you're going to have a bad day.
Yeah, a bad and long day too.
And the student's going to have a really long day.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, and just adding to that, I mean, I just want to double down on that importance, because no matter how many times Scott and I teach this, or any one of the other national trainers that I've taught with many times over, we have pre-meetings before, whether it's virtual or in person, to make sure that we're prepared. So we don't take for granted the fact that we know the curriculum well, but at any given moment, anything can happen. Technical issues, you know, fatigue, anything can set in. And so being prepared and having those discussions well beforehand, before game day, is vitally important. So when we step into the classroom, we're in lock sync, or at least close to lock sync as possible, to make it successful. And as you mentioned, Lindy, that energy is what I think starts the class off in the right direction, and then maintaining that same level of energy all the way through, which is not easy. Because I can tell you, by the end of the day, a lot of times we're exhausted, but the students feed off that energy. And so if you bring in low energy or a level of negativity, they're going to feel that, they're going to see that, they're going to drive off of that, and it's going to just compound and make the day that much longer.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, that was great. Thank you both for that. So Greg, I'm gonna go to you for this next question. So this is kind of going along the same vein about the very beginning of the class. So as I'm sure we're all familiar, the very first slide of the ABLE curriculum is a survey, which often takes about 20 minutes to complete. And I've heard from some instructors that they sometimes see this as a roadblock to getting folks energized for the training. But as you know, we all know, these surveys are really critical to measuring the effectiveness of ABLE training. So how do you explain the surveys to the class and really just keep that momentum going?
Yeah, this is a great question. It's the dreaded survey, right? Where, you know, hey, you're asking me a bunch of questions, and man, I'm just getting into the classroom here, so why do I got to answer questions? And so this is a great question. So I do my best to answer it in a way that makes sense and not too complex. You know, believe it or not, surveys can often be viewed by students as a barrier to learning, as you kind of mentioned, as some instructors kind of feel that way. So first, let me start off with the purpose of the surveys within the ABLE curriculum, because I think it's vitally important that instructors themselves understand the purpose and reasoning behind the collection of opinions, and not just kind of reading from the information that we provide in the instructor portal. Now, students are asked to complete a series of surveys, and as you mentioned, these surveys are designed to really evaluate the impact of active bystandership from law enforcement program. And there are 3 specific surveys that are associated with this curriculum. There's a pre-training survey is the first one. That's the one that's the very first slide at the beginning of the 8-hour block of instruction before you do anything. Then there's a post-training survey, which is done upon the conclusion of the 8-hour block of instruction. And then there is an overall curriculum survey, which is done in the trainer-trainer session. And, you know, there's no overall survey in the actual 8-hour block instruction, but in trainer-trainer, there's an overall curriculum survey. So now the first 2 surveys, and I'm just going to do this from the context of a trainer-trainer aspect of it. The first 2 surveys are voluntary, which means that they can stop taking a survey at any time. The third survey, which is tied to the overall curriculum, is not, and that one is tied directly to a certification. But let's just focus for a second here on just the 8-hour block of instruction. Let's just say you're the instructor, you're teaching at your agency, you're doing an 8-hour block of instruction. So you have the pre-training survey and the post-training survey. So when instructor is in the classroom, they will share this information with their students about at the start of the 8-hour block of instruction. And we're asking instructors to have students complete the survey prior to the start of the 8-hour class, so that ABLE can learn about their thoughts, their opinions, their experiences, their perceptions, before we really dive into the full content of the ABLE training. And their participation in the survey is really critical, because ABLE is interested in learning more about how the training may impact their daily work, which includes their safety. Now, as we know, similar surveys have been completed by police officers and agencies across this country. I think a lot of us has probably participated in some type of survey with our agency in some shape, form, or fashion. However, the information and perceptions received in our curriculum will only be shared within the ABLE team. So it's not shared with the participating agency whatsoever. That information stays within the ABLE team and the ABLE data sets in what we're trying to measure. Students are not required to participate, and they have the opportunity to skip a question that they choose. And that's kind of what's a little bit different than some other surveys where, you know, within an agency, they may require you to complete a survey and participate in it fully. Our surveys are voluntary. However, folks are highly encouraged to participate in the survey, because it really helps with the data metrics for us as ABLE to help to design the next iteration or adjustments or anything, our 2-hour block of instructions that we do every year as a part of the commitment. It helps us to really design that curriculum. And the reason for collecting this information as a whole is to allow the ABLE team to link your surveys, the student surveys, to one another, and to see if their experiences or their perceptions have changed over time. And that's really how we measure the effectiveness of the curriculum in the program. You know, identities are never shared, as I mentioned, with their agencies. They stay within the ABLE team, and the ABLE team is highly trained to handle confidential data and will take several steps to ensure a student's privacy. So when instructors in front of a classroom, those results are not shared even with the instructor that is actually administering it. It goes right to the ABLE team. Now, we do have agencies and liaisons that will ask, hey, you know, they may ask some questions about perceptions and things like that, but we don't provide any specific data set that identifies anyone. We provide very general information about the information that we do collect. And the results from this research and study is really kind of summarized, and it helps us again to just better shape the curriculum and to continue with development in real time. We like to keep the curriculum as up to date as possible with things that are actually happening within the law enforcement profession. And so in order to do that, that information, those surveys are vitally important. So we encourage instructors, and oftentimes I will tell them, hey, you know, you have an out, but you know, this really helps you if you are in the trainer program and you become an instructor. This helps you as an instructor. And if you're not, and you're just in a regular 8-hour block of instruction, this helps us to better shape those 2-hour dedicated trainings that we have every single year. So that's kind of my approach to the surveys. And again, I want to emphasize that I think it's just really, really important for instructors to understand the reasons behind the survey and not just saying it as a boilerplate language and saying, hey, we have another survey here. I think it's important to really let the students know why we're doing it and the purpose of it.
Greg, could you give us an example and just kind of demonstrate for us exactly what you say? Kind of maybe obviously not word for word, but what do you tell them at the beginning? How do you make that succinct? How do you make that clear?
Yeah, so I kind of tell them some of the kind of how I've just explained it. I'll let them know that, hey, this is a voluntary survey. Your information is not shared with your agency, believe it or not. Despite some folks may think that it is not. And it really helps us to gauge perception. It really helps us to collect data points to be able to develop this curriculum even better. And it also helps us to get your experiences to really help the officers that in the field as we develop the curriculum even further. I let them know that, hey, this is a voluntary process. So you do not have to take this survey, but we highly encourage you to do that because this really helps us and ultimately helps you as the officer, whether you're sworn or whether you're civilian, to do your job even more effective and help us to develop a curriculum that's specific and tailored to you and curriculum that makes sense. And so I just try to put it in very simple terms in them and not make it too complex. And the biggest thing is putting students in a comfortable space that they're okay with taking surveys. That's the big thing there, in my opinion.
So, Lindsay, if I could add one thing to that, and that would be, you know, everyone here on the call is familiar with the ABLE curriculum. And you know, one of the things we talk about is we don't introduce new reporting as a part of ABLE. It's in fact, it's like, we know there should not be a I intervene today form that you fill out and submit. We realize that that's an inhibitor, right? So it then begs the question, like, right, well, then how do you measure success? Like, if we can't track when interventions happen to prevent harm because we don't want to do that, right? Then how do we see if a change in behavior has happened, right? Well, the closest we can come, I think, to that is maybe a change in mindset or change in perceptions. And that's really kind of in many ways, the ultimate goal of this survey system is not, I mean, sure, we're interested in like how our instructors are doing, and we want to know if the training is blah, blah, this and blah, blah, that. But really what we want to know is, like, has your thoughts on what peer intervention and active bystandership, have they been modified? Have they changed? Are they different like 8 hours later and 3 months later, right? That's literally the only way that we can measure success. So that's the other little thing that I throw in there as well, is that you know, unless you guys want to start filling out intervention forms, like, help us out, right? Because really we want to be able to see where things, you know, how this ABLE program is affecting the way people are behaving. So, you know, I just toss that home with what Greg said as well. I say pretty much the same thing he does.
That's absolutely right, Scott. That's really great framing. I really appreciate that. And one thing that I do want to clarify is, Greg, I think you had said something about how the first 2 surveys are voluntary, but the third one is not voluntary. Actually, all 3 of them are voluntary when you're delivering the surveys to your agency. Greg, I think you're thinking of the Train the Trainer surveys.
Yes.
Are a little different.
Yes.
But for instructors who are at, you know, their home agencies and delivering everything, those surveys that they get, including that third one, they're all completely voluntary. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. Okay, so great. So shifting gears a little bit, Scott, I would just love to ask you, ABLE training has quite a few large and small group discussions and activities. So what are your tips for facilitating successful large and small group discussions?
Well, I'll give you a short answer and then maybe elaborate a little bit. I think setting expectations. People want to have clear understanding of what is expected from them on almost any given situation. Like when you walk into a room and you have no idea what's going on or what's expected, like you're kind of like, oh, what do I do? How do I behave? What are the norms? And so both large group conversations and those small group conversations, which we have quite a bit of in this curriculum, set yourself up for success. So one of the things that I would recommend, and I don't know if we touched on this earlier, but no, I don't, maybe not today we did, but the idea, and sometimes it's beyond your control, but if you have the ability to control the arrangement of how things are set up in your classroom in terms of tables to automatically facilitate small groups. If there's only 5 chairs at a table and you say, hey, nobody move any chairs, and you know you got 25 people and you've got 5 tables, that math is really easy. You're right out of the bat, you create 5 tables with 5 people. So now you don't have large groups and small groups. You can do some things like randomizing or have an activity that, again, going back to putting things underneath the chair, right? Like maybe color code, like, reach under your chair and pick out that card. If you're blue, you're at this table. If you're green, you're at this table. That way you don't get all the buddies hanging out at one table. You got your wise guys at this table. You got your rookies over here at this table. And, there could be some great conversations there, but we all know that when you put diverse opinions and ideas together, they might be a little intimidated at first, but once they begin talking, which you can help encourage that, they're going to have some really interesting conversations, because now you've got a mix of experience and maybe some youth and inexperience, different viewpoints, all valid, equal in terms of their perceptions, but their varying experience creates for some interesting conversations. So little things like how you logistically get the people into the groups. In terms of large group conversations, I think maybe one of the biggest things that you can do to help yourself is model the kind of behavior that you want to see from your students when they're answering your questions, right? So you're being courteous and respectful and inclusive in your language and in your questions, right? You're careful not to just keep going back to the same well. Okay, we all know that there are people in our department that just love to hear their own voice, and I might be guilty of that as well. So I speak from experience, right? They will answer every single question you ask, and they probably have really good answers. But if they're the go-to for every question, that means that there's 24, 25 some odd people that aren't participating. So think about sort of keeping track of who am I hearing from, who am I not hearing from today? And without being obvious or without necessarily seeming like you're picking on, set it up to where you actually provide an opportunity for one of your quiet folks. So one of the folks is sort of, you can see it in their eyes, they're watching, they're listening, they've got things going on, but they're not really talking. Finding ways to direct the question to them or ask it in such a way that you're going to get a response from them. So being inclusive, bringing people in. I would say, as cliche as it might sound, modeling active listening, right? So restating, summarizing kind of some of the information that you're getting for the group in a large group environment. That's a positive way to encourage conversations. And people like hearing and being thought and being thanked for their contributions. So thank them for their answers, thank them for their participation. Model the kinds of behaviors that you want to see. I'd say when you have people in small groups, the rules are kind of the same. The only caveats there are that you can't manage all the groups at one time. So it's really important that you want to tell them exactly what you want, exactly how long they're going to have to do it, right? And then circulate and move around the room. I know it's exhausting to teach this, and it's really easy, and I've probably been guilty of it myself. When you set them off to do their small group, it's nice to just sort of sit back on the table, eat a Snicker bar, have a couple sips of coffee, and watch okay, I'll give them a couple more minutes, right? I get it. And sometimes, I guess that's okay, but sometimes you just need a cup of coffee and a Snicker bar. But when you can do it, what you want to try to do is move your way, listen, right? So this does 2 things, right? One is it, as you're kind of eavesdropping and listening, their conversations will give you a sense of like, do they get it? Are they kind of doing the thing that you've asked them to do, right? Is someone taking notes, right? Is there people equally contributing, right? So it kind of gives you the sense of like, did they understand what I asked them to do? And you might be able to give some clarification or object or give some positive feedback. It also tells you when they're done, right? Because if you're listening and they spent a good 2 or 3 minutes talking about whatever it is you wanted to talk about, but as you begin to walk around, they're talking about their fishing trip or the baseball game that's coming up. You're like, okay, they've kind of reached their tolerance level of this conversation. We might need to sort of start winding it down. And that's something you really can't do if you're sitting up at the table and not engaging with the students, right? So, in terms of a large group, just model that behavior you want. Open-ended questions so that you don't get yes/no questions. Encourage participation from everybody. Seek out the folks that are quiet, find ways to engage them, right? Thank those chatty Cathy's that for, hey, that's a great contribution. Let's hear from somebody we haven't heard from today, or let's hear from someone we haven't heard from today, right? You can do that without sounding like you're being critical. Small groups, watch the time, keep them on track, give them clear directions, and monitor for progress. And I guess those would be the two kind of buckets of information I'd give on those.
Yeah, I want to add something too, because those are fantastic tips, Scott. The other thing too is from the realm of one, the observation as an instructor, observing those groups. So to Scott's point, when you start to hear the chatter becomes laughter and they're kind of getting distracted, knowing that, hey, all right, it's time to kind of break out of this and bring the group back if you're having these table discussions, but then also understanding where you are in the curriculum and where that fits with the tone in which you're trying to set. And here's an example, right? So after the case studies, we talk about the first group exercise, or table exercise rather, is talking about loyalty. What are you loyal to and how do you show that loyalty, right? That's more of a serious conversation. This is really the first part of the students actually sharing things that are a little bit, I would say, more intimate about their lives, their personal lives, right? So, you know, you have a little bit of fun with it, but it's more of a serious type of discussion. So just kind of understanding the tone. And then kind of fast forward another example, another table exercise like the inhibitors. We like to have fun with those sometimes, right? So as the curriculum goes on, you can find points that have fun. And oftentimes I make like the inhibitor discussion kind of competitive. And, you know we all like competition, right? So Scott and I may walk around the room and say, okay, listen, we're going to talk about some inhibitors. And it's really an important subject, but we're letting them have fun as they're talking about the importance of that subject, of things that get in the way of good active intervention, right? Or positive intervention. And so we'll say, hey, listen, we had a group yesterday, a table that came up with 18 inhibitors. So let's see if we can beat 18 inhibitors. Let's see which group can do more than that, right? Because there are far more inhibitors out there than probably we post up on our slide deck. And as you work the room, you know, we'll sometimes kind of engage and say, hey, Scott, I don't know, man, I got like 10 over here. And Scott might jump out and say, oh, I think we got a group over here up to 15. And so now there's kind of this little competitiveness within the groups, but they're learning as they're in that competitive spirit. And then we come back out and bring them together for a more serious conversation and either look at their whiteboards if they have that available, or just have the open dialogue. So, you know, just adding to that, you can add some creative things that keeps the students engaged, and they start to kind of not think about the time, but also understand the seriousness of it. And it really just, you use the slides kind of a backdrop almost to just kind of support what it is that you're talking about.
I love that, Greg. That's a great tip. Thank you. So I had one more question for the two of you, but just in the interest of time, I just want to see if we have any questions from the audience that if anybody wants to put anything in the chat, we can give it a minute or so and just see. And if not, I'll go ahead and ask my last question. But
well, while you're looking for text answers or questions and waiting to ask the last one here, I'll say one more thing about participation. Never underestimate the power of a bag of Snicker bars. I mean, for a couple bucks for a bag of candy, if you start tossing candy out when people give you answers, well, I mean, Pavlov would have something to say about that, but you're conditioning your students to like, hey, there's a reward for when I speak up. And so sometimes some of those people, and you know, it kind of backfires because everybody's crossfitting and, oh, I'm not allowed to eat sugar, but you know, most people want a piece of candy. So use that to your advantage too.
Yeah, just as long as it's not solely peppermint patties. Like I like peppermint patties. It's an eternal joke, but you know,
yeah,
have a little variety, right?
Yeah, you don't want to just have only peppermint patties because no one really likes those things. There's like 3 people in the world that likes those things.
well, I haven't seen anything in the chat so far, but that doesn't mean folks in the audience, it doesn't mean you can't ask anything. So if I see something come in there, we can pause and redirect, but I'll just ask my last question for the two of you. So the ABLE training is obviously only the first step in creating a lasting culture of active bystandership at an agency. After folks go through the 8-hour core curriculum, the ABLE program does not require agencies to officially revisit ABLE training for another year. So that's 364 days where you have an opportunity to work on building that culture of trust, loyalty, and community regarding interventions, and truly seeing it as providing support for one another. So with that, what can instructors do inside the training and outside the classroom to really set up a very successful first year of being an ABLE agency?
Well, Greg, you want to take that one first or what?
No, you go for it first.
Okay, I'll try to give you some good answers. All right. Yeah, that's really a really good question, and I really am glad you asked it, because I think this is an area where it's easy to feel like you pat yourself on the back and say, all right, everybody's trained, so now we've got this thing figured out. We're good to go, right? And of course, we realize that there's got to be something that sustains it. And some of the things I'm going to say are predictable, and you're like, okay, yeah, but I'm going to say them anyway. So it's things like just awareness. When things that people see stay on people's minds. So that might just be branding some posters or some things around the locker room or the gym or wherever, where people just sort of, there's this reminder on a regular basis that, hey, all right, yeah, we are about this whole ABLE thing. And, it is about helping each other. And as Greg likes to call it, that pension protection plan. We all want to get there. We want to live long enough to spend that money, right? So visual reminders that this is something that's important to the agency. Vocalizing that, right? So having, I forget where it was, but it was a share. I think it was somewhere. It might have been in Colorado, but don't quote me. But this is a sheriff whose territory was huge, and there would be like weeks at a time where he wouldn't see people in his territory. So he did a weekly YouTube chat, basically like, hey, things went well this week, things we need to work on better. It was for internal consumption, but it was his way of reaching out and touching everybody in his agency at least once a week. But he made a point that there was always, maybe it was just 10 seconds, but the word ABLE, the phrase ABLE, the idea of like, hey, remember, we're here for each other. Remember that ABLE training. Just hearing it, seeing it, right? And then talking about it, right? As an instructor, you're in a unique place that people are going to identify you as that man or woman that was talking to us about ABLE. Well, then take advantage of that and use opportunities to, start a conversation about it, either formally or informally. Because again, kind of going full circle, your credibility, your authenticity as an instructor, it doesn't just, stop magically when the 8 hours is done and everybody goes home. You kind of maintain that, right? So people are looking to you. Like, all right, are you going to practice what you preach? I mean, it's easy to get there, talk for 8 hours, but do you really model this thing when things get tough? So maybe you didn't ask for the mantle, but now it's yours. You kind of are the point people for ABLE because people are watching. So have your A game. And then other things just like digital reminders, things maybe on your internal website so people see it on a regular basis. And I know I'm forgetting more than I'm saying. Greg, what are some other things you think that folks can do?
Yeah, so those are all great, and I would add to it. I know some agencies have actually put their ABLE custom logo up on the MDTs in their cruisers, so all police vehicles actually have the logo there. Some have created decals for their vehicles to put on there, similar to other decals that you may have seen, to let the community know that they are an ABLE agency, and also a reminder for them as officers. We've also have had agencies that their chief or their superintendent or their highest executive of the agency will create kind of an intro video. So before every class, they'll have like a 2-minute video that might be playing. And then they might have a message that just goes out department wide to introduce them to ABLE and what it looks like, what it is, and what it means, and the importance of it. Because oftentimes that perception is, all right, this is just a checkboxer thing, the chief and deputies and assistants, they want us to go through this. So, how invested in this are they, and so that's a great way of actually doing it. Also, another thing that I think is very creative, but then also helps to shape the culture internally is to infuse it into daily things that you do within the law enforcement community. So if you have what I like to call huddle meetings, or if you have roll call, you infuse it into that roll call. And I'll just give an example. Let's just say for roll call, average roll call lasts about 30, 45 minutes tops, depending upon what's going on. And you can spend 5 minutes of that roll call, or even 3 minutes of that roll call, just touching on something about ABLE, maybe even just grabbing the 3Ds and just showing the 3Ds and just briefly talking about what the 3Ds is, what that means and how that it is applied. So these things can be infused into a lot of different ways until they get to that point where they're touching that 2-hour block, which has a focus on something specific to the curriculum that's familiar to them, but also make it a part of the culture. Adult learning, in order for things to be committed to long-term memory, you have to touch it repeatedly, right? Or they have to hear it, they have to see it. If you think about those mailers that you get, who the real estate agent is or who that company is that does service in your neighborhood, because you're getting mailers from them probably 20 times over, right? And so, but that's a way to commit to long-term memory. So when you don't see that thing anymore, you know exactly what it is when you hear it and when you see it. So just a couple other things to add to that, I think is something to consider and something important.
Thank you both. That was both really great answers and some great ideas there. So I hope some folks have some great ideas sparked in their minds of what they want to bring back to their agencies. We do have one question in the chat from Scott Frazier. He says, do you enjoy the online or in-person better? It's a fun personal question for the two of you.
Well, let's see. For me, I enjoy both. I really do. I probably will favor in person a little bit more, just because I like that personal touch, and I think the level of interaction and that immediate response is a little bit more connectable. Although we started this project in an online environment, a virtual environment, we had to learn how to make those connections through a digital space. And so there are some positives in the digital space that works really well, that doesn't work as well in person, but then there's quite a bit in person that works really well that doesn't quite work in the digital space. So I think it's kind of a balance. Like I said, me personally, I enjoy both. I favor in person a little bit more than the virtual space, but you find different ways to make both spaces effective and make it work. And so far, we've been successful at it. Scott, I don't know how you feel.
I have a very strong opinion, and that is that I've yet to be able to teach in person in shorts. So I do like teaching virtual, because from here down, I can wear whatever I want. I really enjoy the in-persons, because there's just some, just about that human contact and engagement. You get, as much as you try to be good about monitoring the whole screen with Zoom, I can tell just by a quick gaze across the room whether I'm connecting, if people are getting it, if people are on task, they're playing with their phones, or looking for reasons to do anything else. So I really like to teach in person. But I found, and Greg's right, we've figured out that, just look at us today. Here, we're doing it right now. Like, pandemic did a lot of things that hurt us, but one thing we learned is that we can see some of this technology to do things we didn't necessarily know or think we could. So they're both fun, but I do like in person probably the most.
Thank you both. That was fun. So
Yeah.
it's been such an excellent session. Really appreciate both of your time so much. I'll make a quick announcement for the group that we'll be hosting learning sessions every month going forward. The recording of our first and second sessions, which focused on the social science of ABLE and then on responding to pushback at your agency, are now available on our YouTube channel and are linked in our instructor portal. And the same will be true for this learning session, hopefully by the end of the week. So please look out for a future email on the fourth learning session for July. And thank you everyone for joining us, and a special thank you to our fabulous panelists for a very informative session. We'll be happy to stick around for a few minutes in case anybody has any questions, but otherwise I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.